Eric Stone. I've been in a position of management of this reserve for 3 years and working on the Hume bush cruise for a year or so before that. Eucalyptus Court Reserve is part of a bigger network, the Mount Ridley Nature Reserve complex, I suppose you could call it. Very happy to be in a position to have some positive effect on these reserves. When I came to Melbourne, I wasn't sure whether I'd be able to continue with my conservation works. After a while, I figured out that there were these bush crews, and I got a job with one of them. I started learning about the grasslands then, really. I'd come from a different background in New Zealand, different forest types, and we focused mainly on weeds, weed identification, weed control. Now, as a land manager with the council, there's a lot more to think about than just weed control, learning about these ecosystems, all of the different species. One of the unique things about this reserve, it's a little bit atypical of our reserves in Hume, in that it's not pure grassland, it's a grassy woodland with an overstory of really old mature river red gums. Underneath the big old red gums, we've got really thick regeneration of immature red gums. And then underneath that, you've got an understory of mostly C3 native grasses, poa, stipa, a few wallaby grasses, quite a lot of perennial grasses, introduced grasses in there as well. And to really get in there and control those perennials, burn really helps with that. You more or less take everything back to ground level. If you burn in autumn, such as we did, then you're going to get some of those winter-growing perennial introduced grasses like cocksfoot and phalaris. You're going to get them growing quite actively after that. But you've also created a lot of space around them to get in there with herbicides. Likewise, with a lot of the broadleaf weeds that we have in here, it's been difficult to control those, especially once we took out some of the river red gums and you had this sort of flush of growth on ground story following that. Very difficult to do comprehensive weed control, and so the burn really helps with that, especially in that first 6 months afterwards. You can do a lot more in that 6 months than you would really be able to do in 6 years if you left it unburned. Some of the challenges, initially really it was the red gums. That's one of the reasons for the declining ground story biodiversity through reserves like this. When you really let the red gums go, it makes fire very difficult because you've got these different gradients of red gums from really small right up to really big, and so you're creating a pathway for fire there, which you don't really want. We prefer just to burn the ground story. I think with plains grassy woodlands like this, they don't necessarily need or benefit from as frequent burns as you might do in a true plains grassland. We'll get a lot of benefit out of burning this block for the next 5 years. So in this reserve, what we would like to do is create habitat for native species of as many kinds as we can. Our approach for doing that is to remove some of the red gums, let the ground story bounce back to a little bit with the extra light and water that it's getting after that removal, and then to put a burn through in autumn or spring, control some of the perennial grass weeds. In those areas where that grass has been controlled, reintroduce some more of that native grass structure, but also native forbs, those wetland species which we know are missing from this environment. So this is a little swamp isotome, and there are old records of this plant in this area. It's maybe not super rare in Victoria, but it's certainly rare here now, and it can tolerate long periods of dry, but what it really needs is a nice wet year like this to take off, so it should enjoy itself in there. Okay, so this is common tussock grass, or as every conservation worker that I know calls it, poa lab. This is one of the dominant grasses in this reserve. Fire clears the area around it, gives it a chance to spread a little bit, and removes a lot of the dead, dormant material off the top of the plant, so they respond particularly well. Okay, so this one's Dinella amina, common name matted flax lily, and across Victoria it's quite a rare plant, although we've got quite a bit of it in Hume municipality. It's still very special, and you can see that it's responded really well to the burn, this one, as they tend to. It's put on a good 4 or 5 inches of growth, and you can actually see all around it little Dinella aminas coming up in direct response to the burn. You can feel the little serrations on the side almost all the way up to the top of the leaf. That's one of the easiest ways to pick it. The health of the mature red gums will be increased if we can increase the diversity of woodland birds, which are going to help control things like lerps. Then you say, okay, how are we going to do that? We've got to create protection for those woodland birds so that they don't get ganged up on by noisy miners and magpies. And so what species do we know that can do that? Acacia paradoxa, Berseria spinosa. It's creating food sources for the birds. It's creating hiding places for them from those aggressive interlopers. So this is a really nice Berseria spinosa. Got a really good mix between Berserias, acacias, Melicitis and Clematis. They all flower at different times. They all provide different kinds of habitat. For example, Berseria, it's a bit spikier and dense, and so it can provide a hiding place for the smaller birds from predators. We need diverse food sources for them throughout the year. And so you need to restore the ground structure with more species that are going to create more diverse insect habitat and flowering habitat at different times of year, so that different kinds of birds have different things to eat. They're more likely to stick around, they're more likely to successfully breed. So here we've got an Acacia paradoxa, a hedge wattle, and again it's providing pollen at different times of the year to other species and providing a lot of secure habitat for your smaller woodland birds to hide in from predators. Yeah, you can't go too far wrong with an Acacia melanoxylon, a blackwood. They grow fairly quickly and create a great food source for insects, for birds, and then they die fairly quickly, but hopefully this one creates a bit of a progeny of its own. So this is a Banksia marginata, also known as a silver Banksia. We know from European settler accounts that these were a lot more widespread across Victoria than they are now. And so we are attempting to bring them back. The kangaroos have been using it as a bit of a scratching post, and they've caused a bit of damage there. So I might put a guard around that one. I think that a lot of people that are working on these reserves, at some point through their lives, they found a connection. If you can get that happening with people, if you can get them into wild places, or you can get them curious about wild places, the rest will come naturally.